After the divorce, pregnant wife married a millionaire, but what happened next shocked her ex. In a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Boston, Lillian Alvarez believed her marriage was unshakable until it wasn't. Left with a newborn daughter and a shattered heart, she discovered that vows could be broken as swiftly as they were made. Clutching her baby close, she braced herself for a life without the man she'd once adored. Then, like an unexpected dawn, a charismatic millionaire named Christopher Friedman stepped into her world. Their whirlwind romance and sudden marriage made headlines, but what happened next would stun Lillian's ex-husband and rock the foundations of everything he thought he knew, because sometimes second chances come wrapped in secrets no one sees coming. Lillian Alvarez never imagined divorce papers would mar the coffee table in the living room she had painstakingly decorated. The pastel-colored walls, once echoing with laughter, now exuded a hollow chill. Her husband, ex-husband, she corrected herself bitterly, Ethan Marshall, packed the last of his belongings in cardboard boxes. He had insisted their split was mutual, but in truth, Lillian felt blindsided. They had been together since college, forging a bond that weathered late-night study sessions and cheap diners. For a while, it seemed love alone could conquer any struggle. But as the years passed, financial stress chipped away at Ethan's patience. His corporate ambitions overshadowed their once simple joys. When Lillian announced her pregnancy, she hoped it might spark renewed closeness. Instead, Ethan's frustration escalated. He claimed they weren't ready for parenthood. The ensuing arguments turned venomous. Now, with 6-month-old Ava cradled in her arms, Lillian watched Ethan's tense shoulders as he carried out the final box. He paused at the door, eyes flicking from Lillian to the baby. An emotion flitted across his face. Regret, sorrow, or guilt. She couldn't tell, but the moment was fleeting. He mumbled a goodbye and vanished into the drizzling rain. The metallic clang of his car trunk snapping shut echoed through the dreary afternoon. Lillian sank to the couch, tears slipping down her cheeks. She felt a crushing weariness, her life in tatters at 28. If not for Ava, she might have crumbled. But her daughter's gentle coo reminded her that she couldn't afford despair. She had a tiny soul relying on her. In the silence that followed, Lillian let her gaze wander over wedding photos perched on a side table. Their smiling faces beamed from better days. Shutting her eyes, she inhaled a shaky breath. She had to find a way forward, relying on her old administrative job at a local non-profit, scraping by in a home that now felt too big. Her parents were supportive, but they lived in Florida and had health issues of their own. Lillian refused to burden them further. "Goodbye, Ethan," she whispered softly, pressing a tender kiss to Ava's forehead. The baby clutched at her hair, babbling. In that sweet, innocent sound, Lillian found the faintest trace of hope. If she had learned anything from this heartbreak, it was that love could fail, but motherly devotion would not. In the weeks ahead, Lillian would wrestle with questions of identity and purpose, forging a new path while shielding her daughter from the wreckage. She had no idea that fate was about to introduce her to someone whose presence would upend everything she believed about second chances, and just how deeply that new connection would shock Ethan, the man who once swore to love her forever. Months trickled by, each day a testament to Lillian's resilience. She juggled motherhood, finances, and a smoldering sense of betrayal. Her job at the local non-profit, Bright Futures, helped keep the lights on. She cherished her role assisting underprivileged families find housing and job training. Though it wasn't glamorous, the work felt purposeful, a reflection of her caring spirit. Early one November morning, Lillian arrived at the Bright Futures office, balancing a diaper bag, half-finished coffee, and a stack of client files. The crisp autumn air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed the bracing start. Once inside, she dropped Ava off at the small daycare corner run by volunteer retirees and hurried to her desk. Just as she settled, her supervisor, Paula Johnson, called her into a meeting. Expecting routine updates, Lillian was startled to see a tall, impeccably dressed man seated at the conference table. His presence radiated a quiet confidence, from the crisp lines of his tailored suit to the polite smile he flashed upon introduction. "This is Christopher Friedman," Paula said, gesturing warmly. "He's here to discuss a potential partnership with Friedman Associates. They're interested in funding some of our programs." Lillian's eyebrows rose in recognition. She had heard the Friedman name whispered in philanthropic circles. Apparently, Christopher Friedman was known for strategic investments and well-chosen charities. She offered a courteous handshake, trying to ignore how his gaze lingered on her a moment longer than expected. Christopher explained he was exploring non-profits that tackled housing insecurity. He asked pointed questions about bright futures, success rates, community engagement, future goals. Lillian, unexpectedly asked to speak, outlined the challenges families faced: unemployment, mental health, childcare. She described real-life stories, her voice tinged with heartfelt emotion. Christopher listened intently, occasionally scribbling notes. Something about his respectful attention and thoughtful queries calmed her nerves. She glimpsed none of the arrogant swagger she associated with wealthy philanthropists. At meeting's end, Christopher thanked them both and promised to send his team for a deeper assessment. He nodded at Lillian. "Your dedication is commendable. I sense your passion. It's rare." She blushed at the compliment, hurriedly excusing herself to retrieve Ava for a midday break. Yet as she walked, her mind kept drifting back to the intriguing aura Christopher Friedman exuded. There was sincerity in his tone she hadn't expected from a millionaire. That evening, Lillian returned to her modest house, feeding Ava mashed peas and tidying up scattered toys. She couldn't shake the memory of Christopher's steady gaze or the flutter in her chest when he spoke directly to her. Pushing the notion aside as ridiculous, she resolved to refocus on immediate concerns: bills, groceries, her daughter's well-being. Little did she realize that this unlikely intersection with a powerful philanthropist was merely the first ripple in a tide that would soon carry her into a whirlwind of change, and echo all the way to her ex-husband's door. Over the next few weeks, Friedman Associates quietly audited Bright Futures programs, evaluating metrics and success rates. Staff members were on edge, hoping this influential firm would become a steady funding source. Lillian found herself juggling client appointments and performing mini-tours for Friedman's analysts. Through it all, she rarely saw Christopher Friedman, though she heard updates from Paula about his interest in certain expansions. But one late afternoon, as she was about to clock out, he appeared at her desk unexpectedly. "I'm glad I caught you," he said, holding a sleek folder. "I've reviewed the final reports. I'd like to discuss them over coffee, get a more personal perspective from you if you have time." Normally Lillian would hesitate, especially after typical business hours, but she recalled Paula's emphasis on Friedman Associates' crucial support. She also couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity. "Sure," she agreed, checking the time. Ava was in daycare until 6, so she had a small window. "There's a cafe nearby." They ended up at a cozy spot lit by warm Edison bulbs. The rush-hour crowd bustled around them, but Lillian felt oddly at ease. Christopher pulled out a notebook, peppering her with questions about Bright Future's day-to-day challenges, the emotional toll on staff, and her personal experiences. She recounted heartbreaking stories of single parents sleeping in cars, children caught in cycles of poverty. He listened with empathy, taking detailed notes. When they ran out of official topics, Lillian braced to leave, but Christopher hesitated. "I'm grateful for your insights. Sometimes these philanthropic decisions can feel like numbers on paper. You remind me there are real lives behind every statistic." She offered a half smile. "That's why I work here. People aren't data points. They're human beings with stories." An unspoken warmth lingered in the air. Christopher's gaze flicked to a faint ring mark on her left hand, evidence of a band that once existed. He said gently, "I sense you have your own story, Lillian." She swallowed, remembering the heartbreak that preceded her new normal. "We all do. she said quietly, not elaborating. She glanced at the clock. I should pick up my daughter. The word daughter seemed to spark something in him, a flicker of curiosity, but he only nodded politely. Of course. Thank you again. As she rose, he stood, offering a soft, "Take care." That night, Lillian tried to focus on bedtime routines for Ava, baths, lullabies, warm milk, but her thoughts kept drifting to Christopher's quiet sincerity. She reminded herself that he was just a wealthy donor, nothing more. Yet she couldn't deny the strange sense of ease in his presence. Telling herself it was purely professional interest, she closed her eyes, nestling Ava's tiny body against her. If only she knew that an invitation lay ahead, one that would draw her closer into Christopher's orbit, testing her heart's readiness to trust again, and setting the stage for a chain of events that would leave Ethan stunned by the path his ex-wife would soon tread. December brought a whirlwind of holiday events, including the prestigious Benchmark Gala, an annual fundraiser that Friedman Associates co-sponsored with other corporate heavyweights. The rumor around Bright Futures was that Christopher Friedman planned to formally announce the firm's partnership with them at the event. For Lillian, the invitation to attend was both thrilling and nerve-wracking, a formal black-tie affair at the opulent Milford Hotel, teeming with Manhattan's elite. Paula encouraged Lillian to go, insisting her perspective would demonstrate the real impact of Friedman Associates' donation. However, Lillian's budget didn't stretch to an expensive gown or hairstylist. She worried about standing out awkwardly among socialites, but Paula assured her that the organization would cover her expenses, seeing it as a promotional necessity. Reluctantly, Lillian accepted, not wanting to jeopardize the crucial funding for Bright Futures. The night of the gala, she found herself in a borrowed formal dress, black satin with modest beading, paired with simple heels. Her hair was swept into a neat bun by a friend skilled in hairstyling. Clutching the invitation in trembling hands, Lillian arrived at the Milford Hotel's grand ballroom. Soft orchestral music drifted across the marbled floors, and crystal chandeliers bathed guests in a warm glow. She scanned the crowd with uncertainty, searching for a familiar face. Spotting Paula near a lavish ice sculpture, she breathed relief and joined her. After brief introductions to various donors, Lillian sipped ginger ale, her gaze flitting nervously around. Then she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. Christopher Friedman stood behind her, looking every bit the polished host in a tailored tux. His eyes lit up with genuine warmth. "I'm glad you made it," he said, offering an encouraging smile. "You look—" He paused, as if searching for the right word. "Elegant." Heat rose in her cheeks. "Thank you. I'm not used to this kind of event," she admitted, gesturing to the swirl of designer gowns and diamond jewelry. She spotted celebrities, politicians, and business tycoons, all mingling with effortless confidence. Christopher guided her through the throng, introducing her to key figures. He asked her to share heartfelt stories of the family's bright futures served. Surprisingly, the more Lillian spoke, the more comfortable she felt. People listened attentively, moved by her authenticity. She realized Christopher had placed her in a position to shine, ensuring that the cause overshadowed any superficial chatter. After a round of toasts, Christopher gently tugged her aside to a quieter corner. "They've pledged double the amount we estimated," he revealed. "Your passion convinced them. This will transform your programs, Lillian." Emotion welled in her eyes. She glanced around at the glamorous setting, hardly believing that funds raised here would help struggling families. "Thank you," she whispered, her gratitude aimed not only at the donors, but at Christopher for championing their work. In that soft-lit corner, his gaze lingered on her face, an unspoken something passing between them. Then the band struck up a waltz, and couples drifted onto the dance floor. Christopher hesitated. "Would you like to dance, or do you need to get home to your daughter?" She bit her lip. For once, she wanted to savor a moment of normalcy. "Just one dance," she said softly. He took her hand, leading her onto the marble floor. As the music swelled, Lillian felt a glimmer of contentment. Unbeknownst to her, this graceful waltz would set in motion a deeper connection, one that promised to reshape her life and eventually send shockwaves all the way back to Ethan Marshall. The weeks following the gala brought a surprising shift in Lillian's daily routine. Christopher Friedman began visiting Bright Futures more frequently under the guise of monitoring the partnership's progress. But Lillian sensed a personal dimension in his visits. He'd bring coffee, linger at her desk, and pose thoughtful questions about her experiences as a single mother. A quiet bond blossomed, nurtured by shared lunches and short strolls to a nearby park during breaks. At first, Lillian kept her guard up. She had seen how illusions of care could mask deeper betrayals, like in her marriage to Ethan. But the more time she spent with Christopher, the more sincerity she perceived. He never pried into her personal life, though she could tell he was curious. She felt comfortable enough to mention Ava in casual conversation. He listened intently whenever she spoke of her daughter's baby babbles or bedtime routines. One Saturday morning, Christopher texted Lillian, asking if she might help him coordinate a small charity drive in the suburbs. The daycare center for working mothers could use some fresh supplies, and Friedman Associates wanted to sponsor a supply drop-off. Hesitant about devoting her weekend, Lillian eventually agreed. She reasoned it was for a good cause, and the charitable impetus aligned with her job. She packed Ava's diaper bag, planning to drop the baby at a neighbor's house, but Christopher insisted Ava could come along. "I'd love to meet her," he said simply. Thus, Lillian found herself at a suburban community hall, organizing boxes of diapers, formula, and baby clothes. Ava tottered around, her bright eyes taking in the new surroundings. Christopher arrived with a few Friedman Associates staff, directing them to set up a donation table. Once the supplies were neatly arranged, he turned his attention to Ava. The toddler, all curly hair and wide-eyed wonder, gazed up at the tall stranger. To Lillian's astonishment, Christopher knelt to Ava's level, gently offering a plush toy. Ava reached out, giggling. Over the next hour, Christopher found ways to engage her, letting her help carry small stuffed animals or making silly faces to coax adorable laughter. Lillian watched in silent fascination. She'd never witnessed such patient warmth from a man around her baby. Even Ethan, back when he lived with them, seemed distant toward paternal duties. After the supply distribution, staff departed, leaving just Lillian, Christopher, and Ava. Tired from the excitement, Ava dozed off in Lillian's arms. Christopher offered them a ride home in his sleek black SUV, which Lillian accepted cautiously. During the drive, she risked a glance at him, noticing how his expression softened whenever he peeked at Ava through the rearview mirror. Something in her chest stirred, an unfamiliar mix of gratitude and longing. Later that night, as Lillian rocked Ava to sleep in their modest living room, she reflected on Christopher Friedman's nurturing demeanor. She couldn't help but imagine a future in which a father figure offered more than scorn or neglect. A pang of guilt flashed. She still wrestled with the remnants of her love-hate relationship with Ethan. But as Ava snuggled closer, Lillian realized her daughter had instinctively approved of Christopher's gentle presence. And that small fact chipped away at the wall she'd built around her heart. Amid the blossoming friendship with Christopher Friedman, Lillian's life was abruptly rattled by a phone call one dreary afternoon. The caller ID flashed Ethan Marshall. Her throat clenched. She hesitated before answering, dreading a potential confrontation. But curiosity, tempered by lingering pain, spurred her to pick up. Ethan's voice had an edge of urgency. "Lillian, I need to see you. It's important." She suppressed a surge of irritation. "What for, Ethan?" "We've been divorced for months," he sighed heavily. "I realize that. But can I come over? Or maybe we meet somewhere neutral. Please, there's something I've got to tell you." Against her better judgment, Lillian agreed to a public meeting at a local cafe. After finishing her shift, she left Ava with a neighbor. Her heart pounded as she arrived, memories of heartbreak flooding back. She spotted Ethan by the window, tapping his fingers on the table. He looked older, Lines of stress creased his brow, and his once meticulous suit seemed wrinkled. "Thanks for meeting," he said, rising awkwardly. She offered a polite nod, taking a seat across from him. Silence hung thick for a moment before Ethan spoke in a rush. "I messed up, Lillian. Life post-divorce hasn't been good. My job at the investment firm ended, and finances are a wreck. My new relationship collapsed too." He cast her a pleading look, as if hoping for pity. Lillian's jaw tightened. He had left her struggling with a newborn while he chased success. Now he dared to unload his woes on her? She inhaled deeply, remembering her vow to keep calm. "I'm sorry things didn't work out," she said coolly, "but what does that have to do with me?" He fidgeted, swirling the coffee cup. "I miss Ava. I want to see her. Maybe be part of her life again." The words, though halting, struck her like a bolt. He had never previously displayed genuine interest in fatherhood. She saw the tension in his posture, a man cornered by regrets. Part of Lillian wanted to lash out. "Where were you when I needed help, when I was alone, raising her on a meager salary?" But she restrained herself, letting the hurt simmer. "It's complicated, Ethan. She's just over a year old now, doesn't know you. You can't walk in and out as you please." He rubbed his temples. "I know, I messed up. But can you blame me for trying to fix things?" His sincerity was questionable, yet Lillian glimpsed some flicker of regret. "I'll think about it," she said, voice shaky. "But don't get your hopes up. I won't let you hurt Ava." The meeting ended awkwardly, with Ethan's posture slumped in the drizzling rain outside. Lillian watched him go, confusion and anger battling in her chest. She returned home, mind swirling. On one hand, it felt vindicating to see Ethan face consequences. On the other hand, she worried about the heartbreak he might bring into Ava's life if he proved unreliable again. That evening, Christopher texted, "Everything all right? You seemed stressed at work." Lillian stared at his message, torn between relief at his concern and the chaos Ethan's return unleashed. She typed a brief, "I'm fine, thanks for asking." But inwardly, she braced herself. Fate, it seemed, had thrown Ethan back into her life just as a new door was opening. And soon, the collision of these worlds would set off a chain of events no one could predict. Snow coated the city streets in a sparkling hush, marking the official start of winter. Bright Futures wrapped up another successful quarter, buoyed by Friedman Associates' generous funding. Lillian found herself increasingly in Christopher's sphere. He often dropped by to brainstorm new outreach strategies or invite her to philanthropic dinners. Their bond grew steadily, fueled by shared passions and mutual respect. On a crisp December evening, Christopher asked Lillian to join him for a charity event celebrating the opening of a transitional housing complex. She felt a twinge of guilt leaving Ava with her neighbor again, but the cause was dear to her heart. She arrived wearing a simple navy dress, glad for the coat that shielded her from the biting cold. Christopher, in a charcoal suit, greeted her at the entrance, warmth radiating from his every gesture. The event unfolded in a modest church hall, its walls decorated with photos of families who would benefit from the new housing. Lillian spoke with unwavering conviction, explaining how stable housing could break generational cycles of poverty. Christopher, smiling at her side, introduced her to donors, praising her dedication. At the end of the evening they headed outside, the snowfall turning the city lights into a glittering mosaic. Christopher offered to walk her back to her car. Under a flickering street lamp, he halted, tucking his hands into his coat pockets with an air of nervousness she'd never seen before. "I've been pondering something for a while," he began softly. "Lillian, you and Ava have brought light into my life. I'd assumed wealth was enough, but you taught me the power of human connection. My philanthropic ambitions feel more meaningful now." He inhaled, exhaling a visible puff in the freezing air. What if we tried to be more than friends? Lillian's breath caught. They had teetered on this possibility, glances, near confessions. Yet hearing the words out loud shook her. After the trauma of her marriage's collapse, was she ready for something new, and with a man so different from Ethan? Christopher pressed on gently. I know your trust was broken before. I'd never rush you. But you should know. I love you, Lillian, and I want to be part of your life, part of Ava's life, if you'll let me. Tears stung her eyes, warring with the fear that had haunted her. She remembered Ethan's charm at first, then the heartbreak that followed, but Christopher Friedman was not Ethan. He'd shown consistent kindness, respect for her autonomy, genuine affection for Ava. Still, it was almost too overwhelming to respond. Her voice trembled. I care about you too, but I have to protect my daughter. He nodded, relief and tenderness blending in his features. We'll go at your pace, but I wanted you to know how I feel. She leaned into his warmth, heart pounding. Snowflakes landed on her eyelashes, mirroring the trembling tears she fought back. She couldn't promise immediate acceptance of a relationship, but she felt a door in her heart crack open. In that silent, snowy street, Christopher Friedman's confession hung in the air, a hopeful vow that, if nurtured carefully, could change her life forever. As the holiday season reached its peak, Lillian struggled with a swirl of emotions. Christopher's declaration echoed in her mind. She found solace in sharing her conflicted feelings with Carmen, who cheered her on, exclaiming that not everyone gets a second chance at happiness, especially with a man of genuine character. Meanwhile, Ethan's call to see Ava weighed heavily, overshadowing her budding romance. She fretted over exposing her daughter to a father who might disappoint them again. New Year's Eve arrived, bringing a glimmer of excitement. Christopher invited Lillian and Ava to celebrate at a cozy cabin he'd rented in the Adirondacks, along with a few close friends. Initially, she hesitated. Traveling with a toddler to meet new people felt daunting, but his gentle assurance and the thought of a real holiday escape convinced her to say yes. The cabin stood amidst a snowy forest, its warm lights casting a golden glow on the frosted trees. Inside, crackling logs in the fireplace exuded a welcoming heat. Christopher's friends were a mix of philanthropic colleagues and childhood companions. They greeted Lillian kindly, fussing over adorable Ava. The baby squealed with delight at the novelty of the fireplace and the glimpses of snow through wide windows. Over a buffet of homemade stews, fresh bread and holiday pastries, laughter filled the cabin. Despite the presence of near strangers, Lillian felt strangely at ease. Christopher ensured she never felt left out, keeping an arm around her whenever conversation turned technical or referencing her vital role at Bright Futures. Late into the evening, while Ava dozed in a makeshift crib, the adults drank champagne, reminiscing about past years and listing hopes for the future. As midnight neared, they gathered outside to watch a private fireworks display Christopher had arranged. Lillian wrapped a thick blanket around herself, arms cradling the now sleepy Ava. The sky erupted in brilliant colors, reflecting on the shimmering snowbanks. Soft oohs and ahs accompanied each burst of light. Christopher slipped beside her. The swirling fireworks illuminated his face with fleeting bursts of pink, green, and gold. He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "Thank you for coming. I know this might feel like a leap," she smiled, leaning into him. "A leap, yes, but it feels right." At the stroke of midnight, the group cheered, hugging each other. Christopher carefully took Ava from Lillian's arms, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead. Then he looked at Lillian, emotion brimming. Under the fireworks blaze, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to her lips. Time seemed to slow, the kiss tender and full of unspoken promises. In that moment, Lillian realized she was forging a new future, one that might be drastically different from her past. She felt a rush of gratitude and an inkling of the complexities that lay ahead. Because love stories aren't solely about confetti and bright lights, they're also about the unexpected entanglements that can reappear at the most inopportune times. Soon enough, Ethan would play his hand, and the world Lillian was carefully building could be thrown into disarray. January ushered in new routines for Lillian. She moved in measured steps toward a deeper relationship with Christopher. They continued to see each other outside of work, sharing dinners at her home where he'd help feed Ava, earning the toddler's giggles with silly spoon games. Lillian was touched by how quickly and earnestly he adapted to the day-to-day tasks of caring for a small child. Ethan, meanwhile, remained a sporadic presence. He texted occasionally, asking if Lillian had considered letting him visit Ava. She remained hesitant, demanding proof of stable employment and perhaps therapy if he truly wanted to rectify his absence. To her surprise, Ethan responded that he'd found a new job in a smaller firm and was meeting with a counselor to address his emotional shortcomings. It was a small step, but not enough to earn her trust yet. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Christopher invited Lillian to Friedman Associates' annual staff celebration. It was a large gathering held at a countryside estate with employees, executives, and their families. Lillian debated whether to bring Ava, but Christopher insisted that it was family-friendly and Ava would be welcomed. She agreed, albeit with nervous excitement. The estate grounds sprawled with gardens and a heated pavilion for children's activities. Staff members mingled in a lavish hall, sipping mulled cider and enjoying live music. Ava, bundled in a warm coat, toddled after a small group of other children, her wide eyes brimming with curiosity. Lillian stuck close, introducing herself to Friedman Associates employees who recognized her from philanthropic photos with Christopher. She half expected them to judge her as a gold digger, but surprisingly, many seemed genuinely kind, remarking on Christopher's improved morale since meeting her. During a lull, Christopher guided Lillian onto a terrace overlooking a frozen lake. The hush of winter enveloped them, broken only by the distant laughter of children. He turned to her, wearing a solemn expression. "Lillian, I want you to know I've been thinking about the future. Ours." Her heart thumped. "We've only just begun," she said softly. "I'm still adjusting." He clasped her hand. "I understand, but there's something else you should know. My mother, Celia Friedman, is returning from Europe next week. She's traditional about our family's status. I suspect she'll be wary of me dating a single mother." A flicker of tension crossed his features. "I want you to be prepared. I'll stand by you, of course, but—" Lillian swallowed, recalling the sting of being labelled "not enough" by Ethan's more affluent circle. She offered a steady nod. "I'm not ashamed of my life or my baby. If she judges me, that's her choice. I won't let it sway how I feel about you." Relief softened Christopher's expression, and he pulled her closer. She leaned her head against his shoulder, inhaling the scent of pine from the estate's evergreens. Yet an undercurrent of apprehension pulsed. She sensed a new confrontation looming. Because whenever society and status intrude on love, turmoil often follows. And across town, Ethan too was preparing his next steps, determined not to be forgotten in the life Lillian was constructing. Lillian's first meeting with Celia Friedman took place at a discreet brunch in one of Manhattan's elegant townhouses. Christopher arranged the meeting in hopes of setting a cordial tone. Lillian's stomach churned with nerves. She dressed conservatively, settling Ava in a sweet pastel outfit. Upon arrival, the doorman guided them to a tastefully furnished sitting room where Celia Friedman awaited. A tall woman in her early 60s, Celia exuded a timeless poise. She rose from a velvet armchair, greeting Christopher with a reserved embrace. Then her gaze fell upon Lillian and the child in her arms. An almost imperceptible flicker of surprise crossed Celia's features. She forced a polite smile. "Miss Alvarez, is it? Pleasure to meet you." Polite but cool, Lillian dipped her head in greeting. "Thank you, Mrs. Friedman. This is my daughter, Ava." Celia's eyes swept over the baby. "Oh, hello there, little one." She extended a finger, which Ava eyed curiously. Christopher, sensing the tension, guided them to the dining table decked with fine china. Servers moved soundlessly, pouring tea into porcelain cups. As they settled, Celia began making small talk. asking about Lillian's job at Bright Futures, her background. Lillian responded earnestly, but felt the undercurrent of scrutiny. Celia Friedman was not outwardly hostile, yet something in her direct gaze suggested she weighed every word, silently evaluating whether Lillian fit into the Friedman legacy. Christopher tried to steer the conversation toward philanthropic interests, praising Lillian's role in shaping new outreach programs. Celia nodded graciously, but remained aloof. Midway through the meal, she set down her teacup. "Christopher has mentioned a serious attachment here," she said delicately. "I'm curious about your plans for the future, Mrs. Alvarez." Heat rushed to Lillian's cheeks. She knew this question was about more than just tomorrow. It was about status, finances, a certain Friedman brand of tradition. She swallowed. "I'm devoted to raising my daughter and continuing my work. Christopher and I have grown close, but we're navigating step by step. We want to ensure stability for Ava." Celia's gaze flicked to her son. "And what of the child's father? Are there entanglements we should know about?" Christopher tensed. Before Lillian could respond, he said firmly, "That's not an issue for you to worry about, Mother. Lillian has full custody." Celia's lips pressed thin, but she softened her tone. "I don't intend to pry, but I've seen how messy family matters can become. We Friedmans must protect our own. Christopher's future is tied to certain responsibilities." Lillian stiffened. The implication was clear. She and Ava might represent a liability. Summoning composure, she managed a small smile. "I appreciate your concern. Christopher and I are handling things. My only interest is ensuring Ava's happiness." The brunch ended with an uneasy civility. As Christopher escorted Lillian out, he apologized. "I know my mother can be intense, but trust me, I won't let her deter us." Lillian exhaled, hugging Ava close. She recalled how Ethan's mother once made veiled comments about her middle-class roots. This felt eerily similar, yet Christopher's resolve comforted her. She knew adversity would come from all directions: wealth, ex-spouses, societal expectations. Only time would reveal if their fragile new love could withstand these pressures. And time, as always, was about to deliver more surprises than any of them could predict. Amid the complexities of Celia Friedman's tacit disapproval, Lillian found a delicate balance with Christopher. She avoided direct confrontations with his mother, trusting that over time Celia might soften or at least tolerate the relationship. Meanwhile, Ethan's request to see Ava nagged at her. Each day she contemplated the risk of letting him re-enter their daughter's life. Could a father-child bond flourish so late, especially with her own heartbreak lingering? One late afternoon, after her shift at Bright Futures, Lillian received a cryptic message from Ethan. "I'm in town." "Let me see her. 1 hour at the cafe on Elm Street. No more excuses." She exhaled shakily, half tempted to refuse, but something in his tone suggested a desperation beyond typical paternal interest. She texted back, "Fine. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. But I'm not promising anything." The next day, she brought Ava, cautious, though she loathed the idea of reintroducing her to a father who abandoned them. Ethan awaited in a corner booth. His eyes widened at the sight of the child, now a vibrant toddler with shining curls. Lillian noted how he slumped, tears forming. "She's grown so much," he whispered, voice thick. At first Ava clung to Lillian's leg, wary of this unfamiliar man. Gently, Lillian coaxed her onto Ethan's lap. The baby's eyes studied him. A few awkward minutes passed, then Ava giggled at some silly face Ethan pulled. A fleeting warmth blossomed, like a father connecting with his child. Lillian felt a tug of longing for what might have been, but as the hour wore on, Ethan shifted topics. "Listen, Lillian, I've been struggling. Lost my job. Finances are tough. I'm behind on rent." He paused, clearing his throat. "I was hoping, could you help me out? Maybe your new boyfriend could help." Her blood ran cold. She stared at him, lips parted. "Excuse me." He pressed, eyes darting with a desperate glint. I know Friedman has money. If you two are serious, maybe he can spare. Anger flared. Ethan, you're basically asking me to beg Christopher Friedman for money to bail you out. That's insane. He grabbed her wrist, voice lowering to a hiss. You owe me. Remember, we had plans until you decided to keep the baby, then bailed on our marriage. Heat rose in her cheeks. She yanked free, heart pounding with outrage. You left me alone with Ava. Don't you dare twist the story. Ava began to whimper at the tension, tears rolling down her tiny cheeks. Ethan's face contorted. Don't test me, Lillian. If Friedman's in the picture, maybe I'll fight for custody to get my share. I know how the legal system works. Your new fiancé is a millionaire. Judges might see you as unfit, bouncing from a broken marriage to another man. She trembled, hugging Ava protectively. This was blackmail, plain and simple. Stay away from us, she growled, voice shaking with fury. Scooping up Ava, she fled the cafe, tears burning in her eyes. Racing home, she felt panic and rage swirl. Ethan's desperation had morphed into a threat of custody entanglement. The fragile peace she found with Christopher was at risk. That evening she confided everything to Christopher, who clenched his jaw in anger. He promised to use all legal means to protect her and Ava. But Lillian still felt a shiver of dread. She had discovered a new love, only to have her ex dangle the threat of a custody battle that could overshadow all else. Little did she know that the next chapter would spin events faster than any of them anticipated, leading to a revelation that would leave Ethan thoroughly stunned. The tension wrought by Ethan's threat weighed heavily on Lillian and Christopher. To preempt any legal fiasco, Christopher arranged a meeting with a top family law attorney who confirmed that Ethan could file for partial custody, though he'd need solid grounds to argue Lillian was unfit. The attorney reassured them that Ethan's inconsistent presence and financial instability weakened his case, but the stress lingered. Christopher, seeing Lillian's anxiety, tried to lighten her load. He insisted on hiring a small legal team at Friedman Associates' expense. Lillian resisted at first, not wanting to appear reliant on his wealth. But concern for Ava's well-being prevailed, and she reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Christopher's mother, Celia, remained wary of Lillian's baggage, though she offered no overt opposition. Amid the swirling drama, Christopher summoned his courage. One breezy spring evening, he invited Lillian and Ava to a newly renovated Friedman-funded playground in a picturesque park near the Hudson River. Toddler laughter filled the air as children raced across fresh turf. Ava squealed with excitement, exploring the slides and swings. While Ava played with a volunteer caretaker, Christopher led Lillian on a leisurely stroll along the water's edge. Tall lanterns cast gentle light as the sun dipped below the horizon. She inhaled the crisp air, letting the scenic beauty soothe her frayed nerves. Christopher's silence was uncharacteristic. He seemed deep in thought, hands fiddling in his pockets. At a scenic overlook he paused, turning to face her. "Lillian," he murmured, voice trembling, "the last few months have been more meaningful than any chapter of my life. You and Ava, you fill a void I didn't know existed. I love you both." He inhaled, then sank to one knee. Her heart leapt. She clasped a hand to her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. Christopher Friedman, the philanthropic millionaire who once strolled into her office unannounced, was kneeling before her, holding a small velvet box. The shimmering diamond ring inside caught the lantern light. "I know things are complicated," he continued, voice shaking with emotion. "But I want to protect you, stand by you, and be a father to Ava, if you'll have me. Will you marry me, Lillian?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. She remembered the heartbreak with Ethan, the swirl of doubts about second chances. Yet Christopher's devotion had proven genuine, unwavering, even in the face of Ethan's intimidation. She glanced at the ring, then back at his earnest face. Her voice wobbled as she whispered, "Yes." He rose, sweeping her into his arms. Their lips met in a tender kiss, the swirl of the river breeze around them. Applause erupted from passers-by, who realized what had transpired. Lillian laughed through tears, turning to find Ava toddling up with the caretaker, as if sensing the significance of the moment. For Lillian, the proposal felt like a sudden leap off a precipice, both thrilling and terrifying. Yet Christopher's love gave her courage to believe in a future where her past no longer chained her. Meanwhile, far across town, Ethan would soon learn of this engagement in a manner that would upend his assumptions and push him to his breaking point. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, promising revelations that no one saw coming. In the whirlwind weeks that followed, the Friedman family moved swiftly to plan an intimate but tasteful wedding. Celia Friedman maintained a polite facade, though she cast a shadow of skepticism about the union. Still, Christopher insisted on a ceremony that wasn't ostentatious. He only wanted close friends, immediate family, and a few special colleagues, including Lillian's co-workers from Bright Futures. When Lillian informed Ethan, more as a courtesy than a request for approval, he reacted with stunned silence. Then came an onslaught of text messages demanding explanations, accusing her of robbing him of a chance to reconcile. Lillian ignored them. She wouldn't let his manipulations mar her new joy. She had covered her legal bases and ensured her attorney was ready if Ethan attempted to sabotage the event. The wedding day dawned bright, sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows of a quaint chapel Christopher had chosen. Lillian stood in a simple yet elegant lace gown, hands trembling. Carmen fussed with her veil, beaming with pride. In the corner, Paula dabbed her eyes with a tissue, whispering how she'd never seen Lillian look so radiant. Baby Ava, dressed in a tiny white frock, clung to her mother's side, occasionally babbling happily. Lillian reflected on her tumultuous journey. Divorce, heartbreak, single parenthood. Now, a future brimming with possibilities stretched before her. She inhaled deeply, stepping out into the chapel's aisle to the soft strains of a violin. Christopher waited at the altar, wearing a tailored navy suit. His gaze locked on her with unmasked affection. As Lillian reached him, she realized tears shone in his eyes. The officiant's words blurred in a swirl of emotion. She felt a gentle brush of Christopher's thumb over her knuckles, steadying her heart. They exchanged vows, earnest promises woven with references to love, trust, and shared responsibility for Ava's well-being. "By the power vested in me," the officiant concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Applause and quiet cheers erupted. Christopher sealed the union with a tender kiss. In that moment, Ethan slipped into the back of the chapel, uninvited. He froze at the sight of the wedded couple. Lillian's wide-eyed gaze caught him in the corner of her vision. For a charged moment, the newlyweds and the intruder locked eyes. Then Ethan stormed forward, ignoring the hush that fell over the pews. Lillian's breath hitched. Christopher placed himself between her and Ethan. Fury contorted Ethan's features. "You really did it," he spat, voice echoing in the stunned silence. "Marrying into money without giving me a chance to fix our family." She forced herself to stay calm. "We haven't been a family in a long time, Ethan. You made that choice, and now I've made mine." Before Ethan could spew further vitriol, Christopher quietly signaled the security detail. 2 ushers escorted Ethan outside, who barked threats that no one took seriously. Lillian trembled in relief, tears threatening to spill. Christopher enveloped her in a gentle embrace, guests exhaling in collective empathy. The ceremony might have ended in disarray, but the vow was sealed. Lillian, now Mrs. Friedman, felt a wave of defiant strength surge through her. Ethan's last-ditch attempt had failed, and in doing so, he had only underscored how far she'd come. In the days after the wedding, Lillian and Christopher Friedman embarked on a brief honeymoon, traveling to a secluded villa on the coast of Santorini, Greece, with Ava in tow. The azure waters and whitewashed buildings provided a peaceful respite. Each morning they savored breakfast on a sun-drenched terrace, while Ava toddled around chasing butterflies. Each evening they sipped local wine, discussing plans for the future. Expanding Bright Futures, building a stable home life, maybe even giving Ava siblings down the line. Ethan's disruptive appearance at the wedding had left them shaken, but Christopher's unwavering presence comforted Lillian. If any custody threat remained, they trusted the legal team to handle it. She felt a growing sense of security, grateful that her heartbreak had led her to a man who cherished her daughter as his own. Yet the biggest shock came upon their return to New York. Lillian found a thick envelope on the Friedman penthouse doorstep. Inside was a paternity test result, addressed to Ethan. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she read the details. Probability of paternity, upper 0%. A scribbled note accompanied it. So you see, Ava was never mine. I hope you're proud. The signature was Ethan's. Heart pounding, Lillian stared at the test. According to this, Ethan was never biologically Ava's father. She felt numb, recollecting the timeline. She had never strayed in her marriage. Could the test be falsified? Or was Ethan raising a suspicion that her child was someone else's? Christopher, noticing her distress, gently took the papers from her trembling hands. "This is nonsense," he said firmly, scanning the result. "We both know your situation." But doubt gnawed at Lillian. Could the test be accurate? Had there been a mix-up at the clinic? She recalled how hurried and inattentive Ethan had been during her pregnancy. Or perhaps Ethan manipulated a fake test to sow chaos in her new marriage. Confusion tangled her thoughts. Over the following week, Christopher's legal team discovered Ethan had attempted to weaponize the test in a last-ditch custody claim, arguing that if he wasn't the father, he bore no financial responsibility nor any paternal rights, thus avoiding child support. But why claim zero paternity now, after threatening a custody battle? The Friedman attorneys swiftly dismissed it as a stunt, likely orchestrated to jolt Lillian into confrontation. Yet the emotional toll lingered. Christopher urged Lillian to get an independent DNA test done, if only to soothe her mind. She complied, and the results reaffirmed what she already knew deep down. Ethan was the father, the test refuting the spurious document. With a sense of finality, they recognized Ethan's move as the final act of a desperate man, creating confusion, then fleeing accountability. As the Friedmans closed this chapter, word of the paternity scandal rippled through certain circles, reaching the ears of those who once whispered about Lillian's gold-digging ways. The truth that Ethan's document was fraudulent swiftly overshadowed the rumor. In the end, the shock that Ethan had intended for Lillian rebounded, painting him as the deceiver. Freed from his manipulations, Lillian embraced her new life wholeheartedly, armed with the knowledge that illusions, once shattered, yield space for genuine love to thrive. Sometimes the harshest heartbreaks become a gateway to unimagined hope. For Lillian Alvarez, divorce was an ending, but not the one she feared. Struggling to raise her baby alone, she discovered a beacon of kindness in Christopher Friedman, a man whose generosity proved deeper than any check he could write. Together, they dismantled prejudices, navigated disapproving family expectations, and defied an ex-husband's desperate schemes. Through courage and trust, they forged a bond that championed Lillian's independence and cradled Ava with genuine fatherly devotion. If you found yourself immersed in this tale of shattered vows, renewed faith, and the shocking twists that fate can deliver, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels more stories filled with drama, heart, and the unyielding promise that every ending can also be a beginning. Thank you for following Lillian's journey. And remember, true love isn't measured by wealth, but by the unwavering commitment to stand by each other against all odds.